whether you, well, maybe you would know about it even if you don't do it personally, but how much families are using the mediation process for dealing with aging parents or dealing with estate disputes and that type of thing?
You know, I don't think it's very widespread outside of family law at the moment. Although I have recently started doing some institutional kinds of mediation, working with individuals who may be in long-term care facilities, having difficulties, you know, with the living situation with administration, and I'm finding that very effective. But as for private clients coming and looking for this kind of work, I don't think it's really been marketed, Karen, in that direction, although I think it's an excellent forum for it. I think it works best in situations where people have to have an ongoing relationship after the problem is solved. So that would be, you know, a very good example of that. Siblings who are involved in an estate dispute, or family shareholders involved in a, you know, a family company. So I don't think it's really gone, and that's an extremely important part of mediation, especially because when I'm acting as a mediator, I'm the only professional in the room dealing with two parties who don't have lawyers with them. I work directly with the parties. When I'm acting as a collaborative lawyer, I'm on one side of the table and the other party is there as well with their collaborative lawyer. But mediation and the idea of power imbalance is very important. And mediation takes a good deal of training. When I decided to refocus my career and leave the litigation world, I didn't do what some people do, which is just decide that because they've been a lawyer, they can also be a mediator. I just don't, you know, there's no real professional requirement to call yourself a mediator. But I didn't feel comfortable approaching it from that perspective. So I took a sabbatical for a year and I attended the University of Prince Edward Island, the Center for Conflict Resolution Studies, and I completed about 250 hours of training to become a certified mediator. And there are several courses where we did hardly anything else except talk about balancing the power inside the mediation. So even if there is a perceived imbalance between one party and the other, it doesn't mean that that automatically becomes uneligible for mediation. It just means that the mediator needs to know how to handle it. And that can come from a number of sources. If I have one party in a mediation who really feels intimidated, and I know it, and I know that the other party is using the power of intimidation, I'll work with them separately for several sessions before we meet together. And we'll flesh that out, come up with options and tactics for ensuring both that the power is not used and that it's not accepted. So it's a really good question. It's a really important factor in mediation. It requires training to deal with it. Pre-mediation, I don't sit people down for the first time and meet them in a three-way meeting.
Right.
But you know, the emotional part of it has always been part of my work. And I would have to say that, you know, sometimes people say to me, and it's kind of like your question, do you ever feel a little bit nervous being in a room with two people who are in that much conflict? You know, is there going to be a possibility that things are going to blow? And I think there always is, but I've done a lot of mediation and a lot of collaborative law, but I have never felt threatened the way I have felt on occasion in family courts, which are supposed to be secure. Question, and it's been the topic of a lot of political debate in this province in the last couple of years. 2 years ago, the then Minister of Justice appointed a task force on access to family justice in this province, and the task force did an excellent job and delivered 50 recommendations to the government about how exactly that issue needed to be addressed. That people who can't afford to pay me or others who do it, how do they access these alternative dispute resolution methods? Now, the government unfortunately has not acted as swiftly as many of us would like on that. But the good news is that they have just instituted through Family Service Moncton a province-wide mediation service that is free of charge to clients. Now, it's a little bit more limited than what I do. I do all facets of the problem, the division of property, the spousal support, whatever issue comes to me. This particular mediation services is going to be limited to child support and custody. So even though it's not full service, it's a really good start, because if you can get people in through the door in the early stages to talk about their children's issues, I would bet the other stuff is going to resolve itself in another form. So it's getting there, it's getting there. It's all government money, right? It's always difficult to fund programs in the justice. A lot of parties have to agree to engage in the process in writing. So we all sign a contract, the lawyers and the two clients. And the contract says that they have agreed to adopt the collaborative law process and they will make their best efforts to come to a settlement. And you know what? I would say 9 times out of 10 they do. But if the process does fall off the rails, and in all of them I've ever done, I've only had one that didn't succeed in collaborative law. But the parties understand from the contract that if they choose to opt out or the system just breaks down, they cannot use the same lawyer who represented them as a collaborative lawyer if they choose to go to court. They have to start over. And I think that's a really good approach to that. The collaborative lawyer is never sort of tainted with the idea that someday we'll have to go to court on this and be thinking strategically. It completely separates the collaborative approach from the conflicted approach. So the bad news is you lose your lawyer and you have to start all over again. But the good news is most of the time you're not going to have to worry about that, because it really does produce good results.